Hi, everybody.
Hello, happy Sovereign Sunday.
Happy Sovereign Sunday. Today is a little bit of a rainy Sovereign Sunday here in Brooklyn. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining us. We have another deep topic this week.
Another vulnerable topic.
Which is very, sometimes it's very uncomfortable doing this show because we're sharing like a lot of
personal.
Like really deep personal stories and the things that we're going through. And so this past week has been interesting. I don't want to say, it's been a little bit hard. Like some parts of it are hard.
Yeah.
But like it's been deep, but also very like satisfying and like I feel good.
Yeah.
Right?
Me too.
All right, good. All right. So why don't you start off talking about kind of what you were going through this week and how it kind of led into today's topic.
All right. Well, it's no secret. I think we've shared many, many times over the course of this live stream that our relationship has been through some of the worst periods and some of the best periods. And early on in our relationship, there was a lot of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of lies, a lot of dishonesty in our relationship, and it led to all sorts of chaos. For me, I'm a very intuitive person. I can sense things very easily, and there were a lot of situations in which Danny said things that didn't quite sit right with me. It didn't feel like the details were complete, and over the course of Danny's life, he had learned to avoid lying by just omitting certain truths.
Telling half truths.
Yeah.
Right. So we had committed to transparency after a couple of years of some of these deep problems, that a lot of it was connected to our drinking. We were drinking heavily. Look, both of us were traumatized as fuck coming into this relationship. And we were not dealing with our traumas in healthy ways and drinking a lot. And they're like, so lying. I was definitely lying a lot and covering things up. And, ultimately, when we don't tell the truth, when we're not honest or vulnerable, it comes from a place of insecurity, right? Like I would cover things up or tell half truths because I was afraid that if she finds out who I really am, she's not going to love me anymore. It comes from a place of insecurity, right? And I think that's always the case, no matter who you're lying to or what the lie is. It comes from a place of, I don't feel I can trust this person with the truth because I think I'm not worthy of their love, and they're going to find out I'm not worthy of their love. And that's definitely the place where I was coming from. But then as we committed to transparency, after a couple of years and we started to work out some of these problems, we committed to being transparent with each other. I still was holding back. So I would be transparent to a point, but leave out certain details that I felt were too much for her to handle. Like, oh, she can handle this much, but she's going to leave me if I tell her the full truth. Right. So just I'll throw that caveat in there. Go ahead. Now
A bit of a backstory there. So this past week, I feel like over the course of the last 2-3 years, we've been doing so much healing work in our relationship, and we've forgiven each other and ourselves for so many things. And this past week, last week was the, for those that are spiritual, it was the Lionsgate portal. And so I was participating in a ceremony, and right before the ceremony, I just had almost like a flash of all these things that had occurred during the course of our relationship. And I felt it very deeply. And I thought, okay, maybe this is like the final purge of all of these things. I'm finally going to just let it all go. And I entered the ceremony with that intention. I want to let all of these things go. This is all in the past. We are in a different place now, and we are open and honest and vulnerable with each other in a way that I have never experienced in my life. So I think it's time to let all of this go. And as I've been working through releasing all of those things, there were some things that still I had questions about. And I made a comment to Danny saying, like, I don't know, is it my ego that needs to know some of these details, some of these things that didn't seem like they were the full truth at the time, and
some of my stories that didn't make sense.
They didn't add up. And it bothered me. It bothered me because, again, my intuition is very strong. And over the years, especially in the beginning of the relationship, when Danny would deny some of the things that I knew, that I felt were real, I would dismiss it and be like, okay, fine. He says it's not true, then it's not true. And then I would drink and it would all come out, and I would be angry and I would rage and call him a liar and yell things at him. And the thing that would trigger me the most was him telling me I was crazy. You're crazy. Anytime I said you're a liar, he'd be like, you're crazy. And that would just set me off. It was like a bomb going off at that point. And then
and that's gaslighting, right? Because I knew she was onto something. I knew she was right. I knew she could sense basically what ended up becoming blockages in your relationship. She could sense those blockages to our intimacy. When I was lying about something or hiding something, it creates a barrier. And it's funny because, well, you can continue and then I'll get back into that later. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So then yesterday we were we went to the beach for a while and we were talking and just kind of having these conversations about the stuff that I've been letting go. And as a matter of fact, at some point last week, I had a dream where it replayed a scenario in our past, and I felt the pain of that scenario. And I told Danny about it when I woke up, and he had to leave for work, and so he didn't really say anything in the moment, and he left. And I was like, oh, like, I guess it made him uncomfortable, maybe, I don't know. But I don't know, maybe 15 minutes later, he sent me a text, and he was, he validated the feelings for me. And he said, I understand that it's painful, and I want you to know that that's not where we are anymore. I'm committed to you and to being honest. And it was like this extreme validation for me, and not just because he was responding to what I told him, but the fact that he left and was thinking about it and later had the thought, wow, this is still bothering her. I'm going to validate her. I'm going to let her know that there's no need to worry about this anymore. And I thought, wow, this is like a really big healing moment, because, some of these feelings may linger, and a lot of times what I was looking for was validation. I know this is happening, so validate it. Just admit that this is what's happening. And, we can work through that. I feel like I can work through just about anything as long as we're honest about it. As long as we are both willing to be vulnerable and we're committed to our growth, to understanding each other, to working through whatever things come our way or get tossed in our lives.
Or the things that we create.
So yesterday, while we were having this conversation at the beach and talking about, we were talking about healing and how that validation is necessary. And I said, I've been thinking that I would like for us to have a ceremony and release it. I want to be able to say all of the things that I've felt over the years, because over the years, what would happen is that something would happen in our relationship. If Danny did something that I felt was hurtful to me, I would bring it up and say, you did this thing and it hurt me. And then Danny would say, all right, I get that, but it wasn't really about you. It was about me. And these were the feelings I was having. And this is what I was going through at the time. And so I would put my feelings aside and I would validate him and empathize with him. And then we would work through the thing that he had experienced that caused him to do this thing that hurt me. And what was happening over the course of that time was that my feelings weren't being validated. I wasn't, he could apologize and say, I'm sorry, but it really wasn't about you. It was me. I was feeling this way or that way. And so I kept pushing my feelings aside and saying, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me. But the more you push those feelings off to the side, the more they grow and the more they fester inside of you. It all gets held within your body. And I really do believe that a lot of that has affected my health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted us to have this moment, like, especially after having this experience after the dream and having that validation. I said, wow, what if we just go through all of this stuff that I've been holding on to for all of these years? I release it, I speak it out to you, and you validate me. We have this moment of just validating and releasing together, and that will remove a lot of the blockages, because as a result of all of those times that my intuition was put into question or that there was the gaslighting happening, it creates a blockage. It creates this need to protect myself, because what if he's not really telling the truth? Or is my intuition right? Or am I really crazy? Am I going insane? And to have this moment of validation was going to be healing, I think, for both of us. And
it was literally almost like a reenactment, right? Like her bringing up, you did this and it hurt me. So back years ago when she confronted me about it, I was defensive. And like she said, I would go into, okay, yeah, but I was hurt this way by my traumas with my mom, and that's why I acted that way. So I'm sorry I hurt you, but it wasn't really my fault, right? Like, I'm pushing off responsibility. And while it's true that a lot of my toxic behaviors were a result of my traumas, of both of us, that's true. I think it's true of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
While that's true, I wasn't taking responsibility for how I reacted to those traumas. And that's really, I think, is key, is yes, you may be traumatized, there may be, and that trauma may not be your fault at all, but you still have a choice of how you respond to that trauma. And I was choosing to respond in a way that I was acting out and hurting her in the process. And then I wasn't taking responsibility for that. Now I'm in the place where I can take responsibility for those things, for my actions, regardless of why I did them. Even if it was accidental, I can still say, oh, wow, yes, I see that and I hurt you. And then I can empathize and validate her feelings without being defensive. So we, in essence, what we did was reenact the confrontations of her telling me about how I had hurt her. And instead of me being defensive this time, I could empathize, validate her feelings so that she could feel complete and release it and let go of the hurt. I want to talk a little bit about gaslighting. For me, it came from a place of insecurity, but I was still lying. I was lying, and she was like confronting me or trying to confront me, and I would just deny, or I would tell half the truth. And when she would get, then, sometimes when she was drinking, it would really come out. And then I would use her drinking as the excuse to just tell her, you're crazy, you're drunk, you don't know what you're saying. So everything you're saying is invalid because you're drinking. And what that did was, and you can talk a little bit more about this on a deeper level, but what that did was make her distrust her own intuition. Why don't you just talk about that? There's no point in me trying to explain it.
Yeah, I think that, we all have these gut feelings, and your gut feelings are your intuition. It's your intuition letting you know this doesn't sound right, this doesn't feel right, whatever the case is. And there were many times that the stories didn't add up, and I could feel it. I could feel this doesn't seem like it's the truth. It doesn't seem like it's accurate. It doesn't make sense to me. And when he would deny it, and he was so firm in his denial, that I would begin to question myself. Is my intuition wrong? Are these gut feelings really just so out of control that I have no idea what I'm even reacting to anymore? And that created a lot of problems, because it allowed me then to put myself in uncomfortable situations going forward, because then I felt I couldn't trust my own feelings. So if I was in a situation where I didn't feel safe, I wouldn't say anything, because I don't feel safe just because I'm an anxious person, just because I'm an insecure person.
And that's something that I used to repeat a lot to her. Oh, it's just your insecurity. Oh, it's just your anxiety. It's not real. And yeah, and that really separated you from really being able to communicate with your higher self.
Yeah. And so it created a separation within myself. And obviously, by creating that separation within myself, I can't be my true self in this relationship. And that was really a huge block in the relationship, because then I kept a lot of things to myself. I didn't feel like sharing things. I didn't feel like sharing my true feelings, because I felt I couldn't trust my true feelings.
Not only that, even if you did, I wouldn't validate them. So what's the point?
Exactly. And that's a huge it's a huge blockage in any relationship. And I mean, this is one of the things why I also think it's so important to validate children. When children say they're uncomfortable around somebody, trust that intuition. They feel it for a reason. And if we start teaching kids, oh, don't worry about it, this is your family member, or this is my friend, or this is whatever, it's okay. What we're teaching children to say is, it doesn't matter what you feel. If it doesn't feel right, it doesn't matter. And if an adult is telling you it's the right thing, then you do that.
Yeah. And that's what sets us up in the age of Pizzagate and Epstein and all of that. We're throwing kids off their own intuition that could protect them from being victimized that way.
So I think, that was a huge realization for me, especially as I've been working through this healing process and reconnecting to my intuition. I realized, wait a minute, my intuition hasn't been wrong all along. I knew exactly what I was feeling. It's your intuition is your guidance system. It's what lets you know that you're on the right path, or that, you need to make adjustments, or something's not in harmony in a particular situation, and that it needs to be looked at. And by separating myself from that so much, I was falling deeper and deeper into depression, into anxiety, into insecurity. And I was miserable for many years, and that's the drinking would bring that all out. At that point, I felt confident enough to say what I really felt, and I would be nasty about it, especially because I felt like I wasn't going to be validated anyway. So I might as well just be nasty. And it was like, it was insane.
She's good at being nasty when she wants to.
I am. Well, I used to be.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we've done a lot of healing work over the last couple of years. And, going back to the dream you had mentioned earlier. So you told me the dream, and I was kind of rushing out the door. But as I'm, putting my tools in the truck and driving to the client's house, I'm thinking, and I'm putting myself in your shoes, and I'm thinking about how it felt, the scenario in the dream, how it would have felt for you. And instead of me feeling defensive, like, oh, it's not my fault you felt that way, I didn't mean to make you feel that way, I was just able to say, oh my God, that's how she felt. I never want her to feel like that. I don't want. So then I could just, like, it was like this whisper in the back of my mind, right? And that, I believe, is your higher self. That's where your intuition comes from. It's like your soul speaking to you. And it just told me, like, encourage her, let her know that she's safe now, and that's not going to happen again. Or, if it does, we're going to work through it. And, like, we're aware of this now. We're conscious of this, and we're working to consciously change these behaviors so that she doesn't have to feel that way anymore. And it was really liberating, because then in that moment, so I sent her this text, and then I'm still driving and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh, like, I've come a long way. It was encouraging to me because I was like, I could think about how, yeah, I would have gotten really defensive in the past, and I would have been like annoyed that she was sharing it with me. Like, what are you trying to make me feel guilty? That's why you're telling me this? You know, that's how I would have reacted. And then it would have snowballed, and it would not have gone well, and it would have just led to more blockages. But I was really able to see that. And it was encouraging to me. And I think that helps. It's like positive reinforcement, and it helps continue to develop those new patterns rather than the old, continuing the old toxic ones.
And I think sometimes we feel silly about it, right? Like this need for validation seems like such a silly thing, right? Like, what, I need him to tell me that I'm right? Like, is that really that big of a deal? But it is. It really is a big deal, especially in a partnership. To have your feelings and your emotions, your thoughts validated is so highly important. It creates this level of trust. Now,
it's the crux of connection.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you're not in a relationship to be connected, then what's the point of being in a relationship?
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah, she's been thinking about the same topic.
Perfect.
So about a week ago, when she started to have these feelings, and she started to tell me about them, and I started to think like, oh yeah, you know, there's this detail and that detail, and she only knows half of that story. I mean, I started to think like, should I tell her these things? It's like all these years later, and I'm like conversing with myself. Like,
and we're talking about like 6 years later, right?
Yeah.
From 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
And I'm like, should I bring this up now? Should I like, is there any point to like re-traumatizing her by telling her these things? But I could see throughout the week we talked about it, and she was really struggling and wanted to release these things fully. And, you know, there are times, so we had another, in the morning before we went to the beach, we're on our way to the beach, we had another little experience where she said something to me as we were leaving, and it made me feel like I had a feeling of guilt. She didn't mean the comment. The comment was like, just, it wasn't meant to be like,
it was sort of like, take control of your emotions. Don't let your emotions control
you. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I had already been thinking about and struggling with that. And I had recognized, yeah, I'm not taking control of my emotions in this way. And I've been struggling with it, and I've been working on it. I've been trying, but it was all internal. I hadn't really shared it with her.
So I made the comment without knowing about this struggle. It was just based on a quick comment he made, and then I repeated this phrase from a book that I read, and it was like, you know, well, take control of your emotions. Don't let your emotions take control of you. And he didn't say anything about it. He was kind of...
But I felt really guilty. And then like a few minutes later, she makes another comment being playful, and I was like really triggered by it. I was offended by it because I was already thinking about the guilt of me not, like, I felt I was judging myself for not controlling my emotions. And it really made me realize that a lot of times the way we perceive things that other people say to us has more to do with what's going on inside of our heads than it does to what they mean, right? How many times are we triggered by somebody saying something to us and they totally did not mean it the way we took it, but we took it that way because of our own judgments of ourselves or judgments of them or whatever it is.
Right, because a lot of times we're assuming that the other person is judging us also. If I'm judging myself, then that person must see how I'm failing, and they're probably judging me too. So when they make that comment, it's probably intended to be a judgment or a condescending comment, or...
And it's projection.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what we're doing is we're projecting our perspective onto somebody else, and they have a completely different perspective than we do. And so in that moment, that was like a really powerful lesson. I was like, oh my God, that's what just happened here. She didn't mean that like that. I just interpreted it that way because I was already thinking about me not being able to control my feelings, which she knew nothing about. I hadn't even shared this with her yet, that I had been struggling with this. Anyway, all this builds together to come to a point that she says, you know, I think we should do a ceremony so that we can release this. And I thought, okay, as soon as she said it, I was like, let's do it tonight. There was no hesitation. I was like, I have these things, these confessions I need to make, I need to clear up these stories for her so that she can realize her intuition was right. She was right all along. And it's unfair for me to continue to hold this. And it's unfair to myself too, because I'm holding these things in, and then the guilt of that makes me hear what she says in a different way. It makes me misinterpret what she's actually saying. So as soon as she said that, I was like, fine, yes. And at that moment, I decided, all right, I'm going to share this. And it was scary. It's scary because, these things were not small things. And in some sense, part of me was like, you're risking your relationship. If you tell her these things, there's a possibility that she's like, oh yeah, I'm done. That's it, I'm out. And maybe that's a small possibility because of the amount of work we've been doing and how committed we really are. But there still was a little bit of that fear. So that's where I think we come into permission slips. So to understand what a permission slip is, I like to tell or talk about Dumbo and how Dumbo didn't believe he could fly. So the crow gives him the feather, and it says it's a magic feather. And Dumbo thinks, as long as I can hold this feather, I can fly, right? Until he builds up the self-confidence and realizes, oh, I don't need the feather at all. So to some degree, psychedelics have been a permission slip for us. I think the more we travel this path and the more spiritually and emotionally mature we get, I think we realize that we probably don't need these things as much. Like, we could certainly have the courage to go into this without using the psychedelics. But sometimes the psychedelics grease the wheel.
And I think what we've experienced, especially in this, I don't know, maybe the past year, is that there are many times where we're planning to have a ceremony with psychedelics and we end up talking about the things that we were planning to say while taking the psychedelics before we actually do it. And it winds up being like, oh, that wasn't that scary at all. And the thing is that with the psychedelics that we've used in the past is that a lot of times you are in this place of feeling love fully, and you feel safe, and you feel you are able, your ego steps out of the way. And what happens is that many times our ego is in the background saying, if you tell her, that's what his ego was telling him. If you tell her, she's going to leave you. If you tell her, she's going to be so mad and not going to want to forgive you. And that's all your ego telling these stories, because your true self knows we've done all of this work. We've gone through the worst of the worst. So at this point, it's almost like nothing can surprise us or scare us that much. And I think that was kind of what our experience was like. With the psychedelics, we are in some ways retraining ourselves, because you get the words out, you say the thing that you're afraid to say, and you realize that nothing happens.
Yeah.
That is.
So she didn't even respond. Like, not that she didn't respond, she responded, but I was expecting her to at least express some kind of anger or like upsetness about it. And she really didn't. Like, I was like, do you want to hit me or something? Like I actually said that. Like, I felt like maybe she should, like, get it out. I don't know. But so we did our ceremony last night with MDMA, and so I want to be responsible about this, right? Do you need to use psychedelics to do this work? No. I think sometimes it helps grease the wheel. It helps make it a little easier, especially at first. We don't use them as much anymore. When we first started this work, we were using them a lot more often. And I feel like we're coming to the point where we don't need to use them as often, because we have like kind of retrained and formed new patterns where we don't. The other thing I would like to say is that from a medical perspective, I mean, you have to decide if this is right for you. It's not, I don't believe it is safe or right for everybody to use psychedelics. I think probably most people, but if you have health issues, I don't want anybody to take this as me saying everybody should be doing psychedelics, and if you don't, it's just, there's something wrong with you. I don't think that at all. I think if you feel like it's right for you, then do it. And if you don't, and do the research. It's not like we don't just kind of jump in without doing the research about it. We're very protective of our bodies.
Yeah,
and
we're very meticulous about the research.
Yeah, and we make sure we get our compounds from safe places, reputable, places that we know we can trust. But what we really enjoy about MDMA is the way it frees you of all the limitations your ego wants to put on you. Your ego wants to put on limitations so that you don't get hurt. Don't be too vulnerable because you might get hurt, right? If you take those walls down, MDMA helps quiet the ego. I like to say it turns the volume down on your ego. And now your higher self can just kind of flow through you and communicate through you. And your higher self, your soul, I believe is made it's love. It's pure love. And that's how we're able to just communicate these things. So here I am confessing these things that should have upset her. And she was like, thank you. Thank you for finally being honest, for coming clean, for
validating what I already knew. Some of the stuff that he said, I felt like laughing.
I knew it.
I was like, oh my God, I knew this. I was right. I was right all along. So it felt good. And it was really funny because he was looking at me and he was like, how do you feel? I'm like, I feel good. I feel great that now the story is out there. I knew that it was the case. And even though I knew it at the time, and he was denying it, that was probably the more hurtful part of it. And that was a conversation we had last night too, that there were so many situations where I knew the story wasn't complete and I knew he wasn't being honest, but I had already made the deliberate choice to love him despite that, I knew that our relationship would overcome these issues because I knew there was a willingness. I knew why he was afraid to share some of these things. I knew that he was afraid to lose me. I knew that he was afraid that it would hurt me. As we've worked through our healing process and we've kind of come to the understanding of the honesty being healing for our relationship, because it is, when we finish the ceremony, I like to burn some sage afterwards to close out the ceremony. And I said, thank you to the past versions of ourselves who showed up and were willing to be open and vulnerable and, heal those parts. And really what happens is that when you go through a trauma, there's a part of yourself that shuts down if it's not healed. And so you're shutting down parts of yourself over and over again as you're experiencing these traumas. And when you do the healing work, that part of yourself comes back. That part of yourself is like, okay, I'm safe. It's okay to come out now. I'm, it's good. I'm safe here and I'm loved and it's all going to be okay. And so that really, I felt it was very meaningful. And to have him say the things that years ago were in my head and not okay, didn't seem right, and to have them cleared up, it was like, oh, that's healed. I can close that chapter and it's gone because now it's all in alignment. The intuition, the things that happened, the truth is out there and we can take it from here.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like closing a chapter. It's a full release because if there are things that are left unresolved, they'll linger in your head. They're always like, wait a minute, but this detail didn't add up and I don't know how to make it fit. I don't know how to reconcile that. And as these things were resolved, we can just close it up and all right, now we can move on to the next chapter of our life. We don't have to worry about the stuff in the past that is over. We've forgiven each other for it. We've worked through the core issues that led to those lies. Yeah.
And this was just kind of like tying up loose ends, right? If you still have some dishonesty and some things that, it's like loose ends and just tying them up. So now we can just fully release it and let it go. And and not have that, and then it reconnects. It causes another reconnection, right? That trauma is no longer there, causing a blockage. So now there's there's more space for love to flow.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if there's this, if there's just even an inkling of doubt somewhere in the relationship, that's a blockage, because then you're careful. You're like, well, is he really being honest this time? Is he going to lie to me again? Is he going to, you know, and now that those things are cleared, there's no blockage anymore. Like, all right, we've said everything. He didn't need to tell me all of these details from years ago. You know, he could have just gone on with his life and just been like, you know, I'm just never going to touch the subject. And Danny tends to have a terrible memory about things, especially when it's not convenient for him. So that's always been a like an excuse for him. I honestly don't remember. I don't remember what I did that day. I don't remember who I spoke to that day. I don't remember what the conversation was about. You know, like all of these things that it was just like, I don't remember. And obviously I can't force him to remember something, but, to have it all cleared up was definitely.
Mm-hmm. If you're interested in, and by the way, there's a lot of research happening now. They're starting clinical trials in New York City now with using MDMA as therapy for PTSD. There is absolutely precedent for using MDMA in couples therapy. We have an article on sovereignthecity.com if you want to check it out. You can actually go also through sovereignlovestream.com. And if you search MDMA, it'll pop up. But we have an article talking about how we use, we kind of describe the process we use to use MDMA as relationship therapy.
There's also on Netflix that show Goop by Gwyneth Paltrow. I know Goop Lab. Yeah. There's an episode about the research and the way people are using psychedelics as therapy for PTSD, for all sorts of things.
Also, reset.me is a really great
resource.
A really great resource. They have so many articles about different psychedelics, how they can be used therapeutically. It's started by Amber Lyon, who was a CNN journalist, and she quit over like integrity issues. They wanted her to write like propaganda pieces, and I know she was working with Ben Swan for a little while. I don't know if they were planning to do some media stuff together. But anyway, she runs reset.me, and there's a lot of great resources there about the information about how to use MDMA and other psychedelics. So it's a great place to start researching if you're interested in doing it. And I feel like if you feel like it's right for you, I would encourage people to do it. I think sometimes the fear, as close as we are and as great as our relationship is now, I still had that fear about telling her these details from stories years ago. And it should be something easy to get past, like it's ancient history at this point. But, I just need a little bit of that help to be able to have the courage to do it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's a tool. And I think it's okay to use tools sometimes. I think we don't want to become dependent on those tools and feel like, oh, we can't do any work without psychedelics.
Yeah.
I think that becomes out of balance.
I also wanted to say in the book, Getting the Love You Want, there are exercises at the end of the book that discuss how to basically role play with your partner and work through traumas. Now, the setting that they have in the book is for childhood traumas, because as you know, our childhood traumas tend to be the thing that attracts us to our partners. We tend to choose partners that remind us of our parents in some way, and it's not always a very obvious comparison or a very obvious similarity, but it's the feeling that we get from a partner that reminds us of the feeling that we had.
And sometimes it's very obvious.
Yeah.
Because in some ways I'm exactly like her father and exactly like her mother.
So it talks about how what we do is we'll select partners that will remind us of our parents, and then we basically trigger issues that we want to heal, and we expect our partners to react in a different way, like in the way that we wanted our parents to act or respond at the time. And so obviously our partners don't know that, because most of the time we don't even realize that that's what we're trying to do. So this book has great exercises that you can work through with your partner and kind of role play the scenarios, and your partner can validate your feelings, can validate the situation that you went through. And I think that you can tweak those exercises and do exactly what we were doing last night, just kind of role playing, replaying these feelings. And I told him, this is what I felt back then. I felt frustrated. It was really maddening to feel like I knew the truth and you were telling me that I was crazy, that I was making things up. And so especially when I would drink and you were telling me that I was crazy, that would like just set me off completely. And we were able to have this conversation, and for him to say, yeah, I recognize that that's what I was doing. And I'm so sorry, because I didn't mean to hurt you this way. I was definitely scared and wanted to protect myself. But yeah, in doing that, I was hurting you, and that was unacceptable. And you deserved more than that. And so to hear those things is extremely validating, extremely healing. And we sometimes don't recognize how impactful those things are. Like I was saying earlier, sometimes they feel like minor things. There was a part of me that was saying, like, do I really need to know these details? Does it matter? It's been so many years. Like, what difference does it make? But it makes a difference. And then it does validate the feelings that I was having back then, that I felt like were being dismissed, and that I was being told I was being a little bit crazy.
And now her subconscious can let go of that.
And trust myself more, trust my own intuition a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good job, babe.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you for being so gracious about it and forgiving and loving.
You're welcome.
And, it was scary for me to share those things. And so even though I felt like maybe you should have had a little bit of a stronger reaction, maybe punch me a couple of times. No, I mean, I'm happy that we are in this place that we can share these things. And, now I have a little bit of courage going forward. Like if something else comes up and I remember something else, oh yeah, I never told you about this. I should tell you about this. Or whatever. I can have more confidence now. And I know that she loves me and that she's willing to forgive me and she's willing to work through these things with me. And so every time it just gets a little bit easier.
Yeah. And I mean, over the years, we have had moments of certain things. I mean, I think a couple of weeks ago, after one of our love streams, we were walking down the street and you were like, oh yeah, there was this one time that this thing happened. And I was like, oh. And, we weren't on psychedelics. We were just, having this conversation. And you were like, I don't think I ever told you about this. This happened years ago, like 8 or 9 years ago or something. And I was like, oh, okay. And Danny was like, I felt my ego in the back of my mind saying like, no, she's going to find out. She's going to find out. But I mean, obviously he was telling me about it. So of course I was going to find out.
I don't even remember what she's talking about.
But yeah, I mean, it's been a long process. And like you were saying, there's, it's easier now to say those things. And maybe these confessions from last night were a little bit harder to open up about, because they were, there were bigger lies, there were things that really did confuse me at the time, and that it created so much gaslighting in the relationship that it was scary to come clean and say, yeah, I lied to you and I made you think that you were insane for even thinking that.
And that's a huge regret for me. like thinking about it now, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I didn't understand that I was separating her from her intuition, that I was making her doubt herself to the point that it caused such depression and anxiety for her, because she just felt so confused about her own emotions. She's like, I feel like this is true, but I mean, could he really be lying? Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know that's what I was doing. In my mind, I was just protecting myself from a greater, like, what she doesn't know won't hurt her, basically. And that's not true. What that like meme, what they don't know won't hurt them. That's not true. What you don't know could absolutely hurt you. And like, I have so much regret about that. Like, doing those things. Why? Just so that I didn't have to take responsibility for the things I've done, and like, so that I could just like smooth it along and let's keep going. Let's just, we don't have to break up. Let's just forget about all that, And that's what I was trying to avoid. Right. But in the end, I caused wounds that have taken us so many years to finally heal. Right. Like, here we are healing wounds from 7 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever. And it's like, we didn't have to carry these wounds for all these years. We didn't have to experience love to like, or experience blockages, I should say, to love for all these years. I could have came clean years ago and it would have been over, and we would have been so much more connected for all these years. And that hurts me, that I'm responsible for that. I did that. And, I can't take it back now, but I can apologize for it and we can move on from it. And which is what we're doing. So I'm not going to like wallow in depression about it now, but I do recognize the depth of how I hurt you, and I think that's probably, I don't know, I guess that's probably the most important thing, right? Because that's what really validates your feelings.
Yes, exactly. And I think, over the years, I used to use this analogy of there were times where I would tell Danny, what you did hurt me. And he would respond with, I didn't mean to. So, just stop
Can't
telling
punish me.
It's not my fault that you
I didn't mean to.
Hurt.
Don't punish me.
And I used to use the analogy of like, if I'm putting on my coat, and when I'm putting on my coat, I slide my hand through the sleeve and hit you in the face, and you tell me, oh my God, I'm hurt. Let's say you get a bloody nose from that. I'm not going to sit there and be like, all right, well, deal with it yourself, because I didn't intend to hurt you. I was just putting on my coat. It's not my fault you got in the way and I hit you in the face and you got a bloody nose. Like, deal with it yourself. Obviously we wouldn't do that. It would be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Obviously, I didn't mean to do that. It was an accident, but here, let me help you, because, I recognize that was hurtful to you. And so it was in the same way of, apologizing for something, recognizing that you did something to hurt someone doesn't necessarily mean you're saying, I'm a crappy person. I'm a real shitty person, and I intended to hurt you and I wanted to hurt you. And now I'm going to apologize because I shouldn't have wanted to do that. That's not what an apology has to be. It could, you could accidentally hurt someone and genuinely apologize for that, because it hurts to see the person that you love in pain over something that you did. And, that was a really long lesson that we had to learn over the years. But we are in a place now where we can have the conversations and admit, like, wow, I didn't recognize I did those things to you. And that, it hurts that I did that. And that is validating. It is healing. And I feel more free to move on from all of that, because it's like, okay, he recognizes it. I wasn't crazy all of these years. And I had a reason to be upset or depressed or anxious about certain things in our relationship. It wasn't just me being dramatic. I can validate that and move on. Like you said, we don't have to wallow in it. It really is. I think a lot of people are afraid to revisit the past because it feels like you're wallowing in those things. It
doesn't feel good to bring up those things that cause those negative feelings.
Yeah. And I think that there are certainly cases where it's important to revisit it so that it can fully heal and you can move on from that. Over the course of the past couple of years that we've been doing this healing work, I have felt a lot more detached from these things in the past. I've been able to look back at them and have this feeling of like, oh my God, that was a lifetime ago. Like I don't even remember the two people that were in this loop of madness and chaos. So it was very shocking to have these memories come up again and to actually feel the pain. And that's when I knew, like, this is a deeper level of healing. These are things that I'm clearing out and I'm letting go of. And it's almost like the final moment of feeling it all, and then it can go away.
And that's always been like a problem for me, is I don't like sitting with the negative feelings. I don't like to experience it. I want to not think about it. I ignore it. I'll push it away. And now that's what I really been having to do, is sit with the feelings, feel it, and be like, okay, what am I feeling? Why does this feel so bad? What's the root cause of this? And that's how we kind of root through it and work through it and figure it out so we can release those things. You know, if you have any questions or comments, hit us up. We'd be happy to answer any questions about MDMA or anything like that, or, you know, our process or whatever. So if you have any questions, please, you know, we like this show to be a conversation. So we appreciate the comments and we encourage participation. We flew through that show.
Yes.
Man, it's already just a few minutes left.
Yes. And even that, like, even sharing all of this is scary. It is a little scary to put it all out there.
To put it out there on the internet for people to rip us apart and trash us. I mean, some of the comments that come in sometimes, I'm like, if you don't like it, just change the channel. You don't have to stay and listen.
But I think that it's important. I think it's also a permission slip for others to recognize that it happens to everybody. Everybody goes through these issues. Everybody goes through these frustrations and doubts and fears of losing your partner. Sometimes we don't want to share little things that seem insignificant, that to our partner perhaps may seem insignificant, but there's this like judgment inside of you that feels like, oh my God, if my partner knows this about me, then he's not going to love me anymore. It happens so much and so often that I think it's important to talk about that, to put it out there that we all have those fears, and it causes us at times to lie. It causes us to tell half truths. And there's nothing more liberating than being completely yourself in your relationship. And
if you can't be completely yourself anywhere else, you should be able to be completely yourself in your romantic relationship.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I like that shirt. Definitely question everything.
Yeah, it takes it is, like I said, very liberating. It's a deeper level of intimacy when there's nothing to hide, when you can be authentically yourself with your flaws and everything. And let's be honest, when you choose a partner, unless you're completely in denial about so many things, you see your partner's flaws. There are things that we don't love about each other that is just like, why does he have to do this? Or why does she have to do that? But we still love the person. I may not love every single one of his traits or every single one of his habits, but
what don't you love?
Little things here and there.
But she doesn't like that I pee in the shower.
So
I don't understand. What's the difference? You're washing dirt off yourself.
Not my thing.
I've been trying to get her to pee in the shower, but she won't.
Sorry, I'm not a savage.
Just be free.
But yeah, I mean, and that's really what it is, being free in your relationship, being home. And that's what being home is, right? Is the place where you can let loose and just be yourself. And we've realized, we were talking about this last night, that the more we do this healing work, the more fun our life is.
Yeah.
We're not afraid to be around each other, even when we have nothing to do. Like, we can be in the same room. He's on his laptop, I'm drawing, or we're doing whatever. Sometimes we're just laying there on our phones at the same time for a while, but it's not awkward. There's no awkwardness. It's not, if we've been quarantined, especially in the very beginning, when like nobody was really going out and we were stuck home with each other for so long, we didn't get sick of each other. It wasn't one of these things where it's like, oh God, what are we going to talk about now? Or what are we going to say? Or I need a break. Like it's more liberating, because there's so much healing that has already happened, and we are freer to be ourselves around each other. And we laugh a lot.
Yeah.
We laugh all the time over
Life
the silliest things.
It's so good now. Like, compared especially to like the chaos of like the alcohol induced anger and all of that stuff. I mean, our life is so fun, and we have so much more joy now.
Yeah.
Just about little things, even, Yeah.
So we encourage you to open up and be yourselves in your relationships, to trust each other. And, that was another thing I mentioned last night. Feeling like he wasn't completely honest with me made me feel like he didn't trust that I was going to love him no matter what. And I had been telling him for years, I'm going to love you no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter. I love you. I'm making that choice. And it felt like he didn't trust that. He didn't trust that I was really going to live up to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really painful. And I think now, after all of these years, after all of the traumas that we've been through, we both trust that we love each other. We both trust that we love each other unconditionally. And if you can't trust that your partner loves you unconditionally, then maybe there's something that you need to look at in their relationship. Do I really want to spend my life with somebody that's not going to love me unconditionally, and that I am afraid of sharing who I really am with?
Yeah.
So that's our little nugget of truth in there.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate, this is our 20th episode, actually. So it's kind of like a little bit of a milestone, I guess. How many months is that? We started in March.
Yeah.
8 minus 3 is 5. 5 months we've been doing this now. All right. Well, we really appreciate you guys showing up and joining us, and your comments. Most of them are great. Some of them are
questionable.
Sometimes some of you people need to do your shadow work, and it shows.
But we send you love anyway.
We do, and we see it for where it's coming from. So, yeah. Follow us on social media. We'd really appreciate that. We broadcast on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Float. And I always like to talk about Float and Minds.com, because they are privacy centric social media apps. They do not censor, and they don't sell your information. So and their functionality is very similar and high quality, like to Facebook or the big social media apps. So you're not really giving up any functionality for the fact that you don't have to worry about your information being sold, and they're not going to try and censor information, or there's no they're removing posts and all that stuff because of, goes against their COVID rules or whatever. So in this age where the big tech companies are openly admitting that they're censoring certain information, I just really appreciate these social media networks that are refusing to, that they have integrity and they refuse to censor. So check us out on those platforms, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Bye.
Bye.